I was getting error messages. Like, if anything could happen, it definitely happened today. All right. So I just want to make sure that I am where I'm supposed to be. I have my phone right here. So when people join and put anything in the chat, that I can go ahead and see it. Um, whew, y'all, I'm so thankful to be here today. Because when I tell you, it was so hard to get in here. Oh, let me turn. Okay. Let me turn. All right. Um, had to turn my sound off for a second. I don't know what was going on. All righty, all righty, all righty, all righty. So we are here, we are here, we are here, and we are live. So I'm gonna put my phone up right here so I can see everything clearly. All right, got my phone so that way I can see the chat when you guys come in. I am just sitting my computer so I can be where I'm supposed to be. All right. Okay. So I know I got here late, y'all. I got here late. So I'm going to just jump in and get into it. So I just want to apologize for being an hour late, but we here. We made it. We made it. We made it. We made it, y'all. So before I go ahead and get started, let's talk about the topic tonight. Tonight we are going to talk about, are we the misogynist that we complain about? And this was inspired by a song that I love. I love. I love. So, but first, wait. Maybe I should tell y'all who I am. Maybe I should tell you guys exactly who I am. Hey guys, what's going on? I'm the Brown Girl. I am creator of Brown Girl Experience. And this is an episode of Miseducation of a Brown Girl. This is a space that I created where we unpack the lessons that we inherited, with the stories that we were told, and the rules that we had to live by, but none of us ever agreed to them. You know, we don't know how we started living here, but here we are. But together through this podcast and through all the platform with the Brown Girl Experience, we are going to figure out what that we want to keep, what we want to release, and the shit that we're just going to go ahead and remix so that we can redefine our lives on our own terms. All right. And so now that you know who I am and now that you know what I represent, let's get into this live. Hey, y'all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. So one of the things that you will learn about me pretty quickly, especially this month if you're just meeting me for the first time, is that music is everything to me. It is literally woven into everything that I do. It's when I think about music, I always think of it as it is the greatest teacher that I've ever had. Is some of the biggest lessons for me have come from lyrics. My deepest moments of self-discovery has literally come from a song that somebody sang. You know, and I'll be honest with you, some of the best conversations I had is because someone sang a song that moved me to in such a way that I was like, yo, we got to talk about this. And that's how I got here. And so if you're new around here, one of the things that you're definitely going to see is that music is the root to everything in the Brown Girl Experience. So I hope you love it. I hope you tune in. I hope you decide to stick around with us. So this episode is going to be something special because it is Black Music Month. Okay. And with Black Music Month, I've been listening to music differently. You know, I'm not just hearing songs the way that I usually do as like background noise and stuff like that. I'm paying attention and really letting them sit with me. So I'll keep looking down the chat. Hey, Ayana. And this morning when I was walking Nakia, this song just popped up on my playlist randomly. And it was Aretha Franklin. Do y'all remember A Rose is Still a Rose? Do y'all remember that song? Because I haven't heard that song in years, I tell you. But when I listened to it this morning, it hit me different, you know, and it got me thinking about us. It got me, when I say us, I mean Black women, you know, about how we're always talking about how we are girls and everything. Not only are we girls, but we out here together fighting the patriarchy, you know, how we celebrate our sisterhood, how we talk about supporting other women, you know, and what it looks like. And then I started thinking about something that's not as popular. I started thinking about how we actually do treat each other, especially when we're out here on Jay-Z's internet, and then I started paying attention to things that I've seen over the last few weeks, like how we judge each other, how we talk about each other. The big one is how quickly we decide who deserves grace and who doesn't. And even bigger, like how quickly we decide who deserves to be respected and who isn't, how quickly we decide whose story is worth understanding and whose story never gets a chance to be told. And so I really started thinking about it, and before I knew it, I started asking myself a very uncomfortable question. Are we, and I'm in the mix with everybody, are we the misogynist that we complain about? Child, when I tell you, I shook myself, all right? And before anybody starts clutching their pearls, hear me out. Because like, I know a lot of times when we think of the word misogyny, we always think about it in terms of men. And misogyny absolutely shows up in those spaces, the way that men view us women, the way they treat us women, the way they talk about us women. But misogyny is bigger than men. Misogyny is a system, basically, and it's basically like a set of ideas about women, ideas about how women should be, how we should act, how we should react, how we should dress, how we should move, how we should behave, all those things. It really comes down to it. Misogyny to me, I'm just going my, not Webster's dictionary, just my definition. Misogyny also decides who deserves respect and who deserves protection and empathy. And the uncomfortable part is that women can inherit those beliefs too. Yeah, and not only can we inherit them, child, we can enforce them. Yeah, and we repeat them and we pass them down, not even realizing what we're doing. And hold on, let me see what we got in the chat here, because my good sis, she always got something good to say. We complain that men are becoming controlling when they make tons of money, but oh, girl, but what about us? Girl, yes. Yes, because let me tell you, I have seen, and I'm not even saying I have seen from third party, I have seen, and I have probably been, I'm looking at the chat instead of the camera, I have probably been that woman at some point in time in my life where, because I made a certain set of dollars, that I might have treated a man differently, or less than, because of the money he made. But worse, I know that I've treated some women differently because of the work that they do and things like that. Like when I tell you that the way I had to check myself, the way that I had to look at myself differently when I was preparing for this live, I was disappointed in some of the seasons that I was in. So that right there. And I like the eyeballs because, listen, when you holding a mirror up to yourself, it hurts sometimes. It hurts. And I think sometimes it's difficult because sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing it. I think a lot of what we do is something that we never even think about. And even when it comes to how we define ourselves and everything, how we think about our womanhood, if we really, really think about it, did our womanhood even originate with us? And this is where I'm gonna tap into the audience real quick, because I'm gonna ask you guys, before I continue my rant for a little bit longer, I'm gonna ask you guys to put in the chat, who taught you about Black womanhood? How did you learn to be the type of woman that you are? Is it something that you learned from your mother? Is it something that you learned from your grandma? And what did they teach you? And so feel free to share in the chat, because I am curious to how other people learned about their womanhood and how it compares to how I learned. Because I'll be honest with you, like, I learned from my mother, but then through therapy and things like that, I realized that my mother learned from her mother, and all of them inherited a version of it. They inherited their womanhood through patriarchy or the male gaze. Some of their womanhood, their ideals around their womanhood was related to respectability politics that are rooted in systems that are designed to oppress us. Some of us, learned through generations of Black women who were trying to survive these same systems that were never built for us to begin with. So when it came to our womanhood, we didn't really learn our womanhood. We learned how to follow rules. And we learned how to follow rules about what it was like to be a good woman, what it looked like, rules about what respectable looks like when it comes to women, rules about what kind of Black women deserve that protection, and, what kind of Black women make us proud versus the Black women who make us uncomfortable. And before we know it, sorry, I just keep looking down at the chat, before we know it, we got to the point where we started policing each other. And I don't think we started policing each other out of malice. I don't think we did it out of hate, or meaning to do it. I think we put it under the umbrella of holding each other accountable. Because, accountability, that's the thing. That's the thing. You're always hearing that we're never accountable when it comes to each other. And when we hold each other to this certain standard, it's almost as if we're holding each other to a standard of lessons that we inherited and lessons that we never even stopped to question. And that is where it gets tough, because I'm like, damn, how did we get here? And how many generations did it take for us to get to here? And we never questioned shit about it. And I think for me, that's why that song, A Rose is Still a Rose, hit different this morning, because at its core, it's a song reminding a young lady about her self-worth. Y'all remember the video, right? Because Q-Tip, chef's kiss, that's not why we're here. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. But it was about teaching a young woman her self-worth, but it also had a very strong message for us grown ass women, asking us to remember to look at each other with humanity. Remember that we as a collective, we're more than our mistakes, we're more than what happened to us, we're more than, how we present ourselves and how others present themselves to us. We're more about the stories that were told about us. And then it really got me sitting and thinking differently. How often do we extend grace to women that we don't understand? How often do we hear a woman's story before deciding who she is? Or do we even lead with curiosity anymore? Or do we lead with judgment? Because are you following the rules? Are you doing the standard? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? Like, how often do we even look at it as if we're looking to see the woman for the rose, or are we only looking at her thorns? And if I'm being honest with myself and with you guys that are watching me tonight, sometimes the hardest judgment that we get, that we experience, it ain't from the fellas. Sometimes it's from each other. And for me, that's when I had to hold a mirror up to myself. And like I mentioned earlier, because of Ayana's question or her statement, I've had a few long seasons with an S at the end, where I led with misogyny. I was a judgy heifer. Okay. And if when I think about it, I had to get to the root of that shit so quick, because it kept me in a space of constant comparison. And that is where I lived. And I'll be honest with you, during those seasons, again, seasons with an S, I was silently miserable. And you know why? When I got to the root of it, it's because I signed the good girl contract. Yeah. And when I think back on it, that good girl contract was the equivalent of a bad boy contract. And y'all know what I'm talking about. The bad boy contracts where everybody got something out of it but you. And it had the nerve, the mitigated gall to be a strict program at that, with the promise that if you follow these rules, if you live by this code, that you're going to get all the good things. The reward was going to be that dope ass life, the life of your dreams. All you had to do is move a certain way. All you had to do is not be too much, be understandable, be agreeable, don't be selfish, put everybody's needs or anybody's needs before your own. The program told you be desirable, but bitch, don't do too much, because there's a thin line between being a good girl and a hoe. And all you had to do is just stick with the program, and you'll have the life of your dreams. That is the contract that I signed up for. That is what I expected from being a good girl. But what I did not know, well, all bad boy contracts becomes the little teeny tiny small print in a font that's damn near written with invisible ink that only seasoned lawyers can read. And it was telling me what that contract was going to cost me. It meant that I had to swallow desires. It was okay to be desirable, but you better not be out there prioritizing your pleasure or you'd be a whole ass floozy. Do we even say floozy anymore? That's a word that my grandma used to say. But it also meant you had to ignore your instincts, and damn near on a daily basis, you had to convince yourself that the dream, that perfect life, that the career, the husband, the kid was more important than you being yourself. And this is where I'm going to stop here for a moment. I want to tap in because, like, when I say that I signed that good girl contract, like, I need to tap in. Did I sign that contract by myself? Like, was I the only one that signed up for the bad boy for life deal? Like, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not the only simpleton out here that was out there just doing that kind of work. Because not only did I sign the contract, but I played the hell out of that part. I was winning award-winning performances every day. They talk about lean into respectability policy. Check. What? Be selfless or be a ride or die chick? Double check. Be patient. Child, listen. Patience ain't even my ministry. But I learned to practice patience so well that I forgot what the fuck I was being patient about. Okay. All because I was waiting. I signed for that contract, and that contract promised me a lot of good things. It promised me love. It promised me belonging, connection, partnership. It promised me the good life. And then one day I woke up and I realized that the math wasn't mathing. And I started paying attention to the other women who weren't following the rules. And when I say they weren't following the rules, these women's out there are being louder, they're being outspoken, they're being more sexual, they're more unapologetic. These are the women that, are out there living their life on their own terms, not by the rules of the game. And how dare they? How dare they? How dare they get the good things that they're getting, the things that I was told that only the good girls would get. And that is the moment that created resentment for me. That is the moment that I started looking at these women differently because I felt cheated. I felt cheated. I was pissed. I was angry. And I didn't even have the language for what I was feeling until I'm trying to think. Do y'all remember being Mary Jane? Like, first of all, I love that show. I think it was one of the most well-written shows out there for professional Black women. And that was a series that I literally seen myself in all the time. From how she moves, her being successful in everything except for one thing, and that was love. And how that one thing that she couldn't get was the thing that rules her. Like, I got that. I understood that to my core. So then it was that one episode, I'm not sure what season, it was the season where she had met that guy from London. And on their first link, she told him to say that he loved her and everything. Like, listen, when I tell you I was into that show, I was fully vested in that show. But it also, like, it was after they broke up and he had written like a pilot or something, and it was about her loosely, their relationship loosely. And it was her and this other lady, they were having a conversation. And she had one of the best monologues that I heard on TV. And she actually snapped. Okay. Like, and I think sometimes that's where the most realistic words come from, because it came from such an emotional space. Because she was talking to her friend and she's like, we live in a society that treats us like we are the bottom of the barrel. And I'm paraphrasing, that we're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to romance. And then that shit is coupled with having to constantly prove ourselves, as being enough. You can be confident, but you can't be intimidating. You can be smart, but you can't be emasculating. Like, she started talking about how we are never enough, but we're always too much. And then the part that really, really stuck out to me is when she said, men are encouraged to objectify our bodies. But the second that we search for our own sexual satisfaction, that we are whores. But it's how she finished her monologue that touched my spirit in such a way that I'm getting emotional thinking about it, because she said they always talk about what we did, but nobody ever asked how we got there or why we did what we did. Y'all, when I tell you, that was my oh shit moment, you know, because somewhere along the way, I had to realize that I became the very system that I hated. I was judging other Black women who did not sign up for that strict good girl program like a fucking misogynist that I was. That's how I was looking at them. And I was moving like that, and I was trying to figure out, like, well, how did I get there, besides the fact that I drank the Kool-Aid? Like, let's be clear, it was cherry. Or do we even say cherry? See, that's my Blackness not showing, because I said cherry and not red. One check away from my Black card. But I was treating them like a misogynist, and I was asked myself, how did I get there? And I got there because they were free, and I imprisoned myself, and I still did not get the life that I was promised, and I was pissed about it, because how dare they live their lives by their rules and have this dope ass life, and I couldn't. And that's when I started picking them apart. I started talking about them. I started dragging them. I started dragging them for filth, until one day a good sis humbled. A good free spirited sis humbled the fuck out of me. Okay. When I tell you she humbled me, she dragged me, because she told me my beef is not with her. She's like, I could live a colorful life. And I could live the same colorful life that she lives, but instead I choose gray. And I hate it there. And that's why I'm mad. And child, when I tell you, she dragged me, she read me for Phil. And she's like, because you keep going back to gray every fucking day. I was humbled in the best way. And it took time and therapy, okay, for me to learn how to break every single fucking rule. I had to learn to take off all the layers of the personas that I was cosplaying as. I had to learn that coloring the lines was boring. Like, I didn't want it. I never signed up for that. And so then I decided that I was going to leave my mark on everything in whatever color that I wanted to. Graffiti was everywhere. And at that point, I started doing things like finding my voice, embracing not just my sensuality, but I repaired the relationship that I had with my sexuality, and I started enjoying it. I went from TMI moment. I went from a missionary and backshots only to being choked while I was riding him and never looking back. Like, when I tell y'all, I accepted that I was a Black woman and realized that these motherfuckers gonna talk anyway. They're gonna talk anyway. So I may as well give them something to talk about. But the most important thing that I learned grace. And I learned how to forgive myself when I didn't know better. I also learned to I also learned to forgive myself when I did know better. And I learned to forgive myself when I did it 10 more times after knowing that I knew better. I stopped putting that magnifying glass to the times that I fucked up. And then I just started looking at them as, these are lessons. These are the lessons that I need to grow. And then with that, I was able to stop being a misogynist. Yeah. I was able to start leading with curiosity. I became interested in the stories and experiences of Black women, and the hows and the why they got there. And that shit was life changing. And it meant that I had a richer community. My authenticity attracted a better quality of humans. And when I say humans, friends, better quality family members, better relationship with family members, and better quality of men. It was all humans, because they couldn't find me under the mask that I was wearing, and breaking all the rules gave me the dope life that I was not supposed to have. And I ain't gonna hold y'all. I love it here. And every now and then, I ain't gonna lie, every now and then a little misogynist inside of me, she do like to make a guest appearance, but I remind that hoe that I could fight. And then I listen to A Rose is Still a Rose. And I love on my sisters just a little bit harder on those days. So my closing question tonight is I want to leave you guys with this. Think about the type of women that you judge the most. The women who make you shake your head. The women who you immediately put in a different category. The women that you say, yo, I could never rock with her. I couldn't be her friend. I want you to look at the women whose choices that make you feel uncomfortable. And then I want you to ask yourself, what is she reflecting back to me? Because maybe she's not here to be a warning to you. Maybe she's here to be a mirror to you. Yeah. And that's why I love music so much. Music always knows what conversation I'm supposed to have next. Yeah. And so if you want to continue, if you want to have a little bit of homework, I'm going to leave you with one, two, three journal prompts that you can work throughout the week. And the first one is, what beliefs about women am I carrying that actually belong to me? Number second journal prompt for your week is, what have I inherited that I never questioned? And the last one, number three, am I treating women with the lens of their humanity or through the lens of somebody else's rules? And that's all I got for y'all tonight. This is the Brown Girl. This is another episode of Miseducation of a Brown Girl. And I want to thank you for joining tonight. If this is something that resonated with you, if you want to stay in contact with me, make sure you like, follow, and share, because we are here every week to do live. So every week is always going to be a different topic. Hopefully we don't have the same technical issues that we had tonight going forward, but I just want to say thank y'all and everything. Like, follow, tell your friends that I'm around here, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye. Mm-mm-mm.